Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today I'm very happy to have with me record producer and ace musician. You may know him from the Shadowy Men from the Shadowy Planet, Don Pyle. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thanks. Good to be here.
It's good to have you here. So, you have a brand new book. This isn't your first book, but it's the first one that has a lot of words in it, as far
Yeah,
as I know.
I know some of
You've
them different from each other.
Yeah. So the first was the first two were photo albums, really.
Well, the first book is called Trouble in the Camera Club, and it's
Okay.
probably about two-thirds photos and a third writing about the photos. So the first book is photos that I took mostly when I was a teenager, kind of at the beginning of punk rock. So there are a lot of photos of first shows of a lot of punk bands in Toronto and sort of punk adjacent, Brian Ferry, David Bowie, that kind of stuff. Lots of local bands. So there were photos that I was taking uh, when I very first started going to shows, and so yeah, that's my first book, and then the second book is called Shot in a Mirror, and it's a small book of photo portraits with just like one essay in it. But the new book, Rough Description, is all writing except for one photo that heads up each chapter.
And this is your autobiography,
I wouldn't really say it's an
more or less.
autobiography. I think memoir, even to say memoir, memoir feels kind of, I don't know. There's something about that word that I just don't connect with, but by the definition, I am. It is a memoir. I write a lot about other people, people who've been significant to me, people who I've had kind of emotional experiences with, or music experiences, or all kinds of things. So I write about, there's several chapters about like Dallas Good, a musician that I worked with and played with and was friends with for many years. Steve Albini, producer that I'd worked with a number of times and was friends with. A man named Albert Chiat, who was my big brother when I was a kid, my mother, and then I write about other experiences too, like starting first bands and touring experiences, a lot of which is with Shadowy Men. Chapter about working on Kids in the Hall show. Um, Chapter about
Yeah,
going
and,
to
and
hair
I noticed
school.
in your preface you say it's a memoir of sorts, but it's as much about other people who have affected you, and I get
Yeah,
that. Yeah, from reading through the book. So you've had a long and illustrious career in the music business, and you mentioned Dallas Good, and may he rest in peace. I've interviewed his dad on this show a couple of times, and
oh yeah.
I I have to say, when your publicist sent me the email and wanting to know if I wanted to interview you, immediately I saw Shadowy Men from the Shadowy Planet, and I that theme song from the Kids in the Hall is stuck in my membrane. It's just down, 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 down. That's one of those things, right, that just
Yeah.
stays with you. Now, I know that you're mainly known as a drummer, but as a producer, do you have anything to do with writing those melodies?
Oh yeah, I mean, we all wrote those songs together.
Okay.
When we started, a lot of our songs came out of one person kind of introducing an idea, and then the three of us just kind of like playing that idea over and over and over, and lots of recording bits, and then kind of recognizing sort of after the fact that this bit fits with that bit, and in some cases making some pretty crazy arrangements. But we were all right. Or I would say Reed Diamond, who's the bass player in the band, he was certainly like the most prolific. Each of us kind of like had our strengths, but Reed, I always think of as being like the hook master. He was the one who wrote a lot of the catchiest things. And each of us, uh, I can't play guitar, I can barely play keyboards, but enough that in this world you can play keyboards into your computer and kind of fix up your performance, or at least write it well enough for someone else to who knows how to play it. So sometimes songs came out that way, where you write it in the poor language that you speak, and then someone who speaks that language much more fluently turns it into something a little more poetic or interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think most guitar players, lead guitar players, have a hard time constraining themselves to the point where they can play a simple melody like that theme song from the Kids in the Hall. They just want to riff all over everything, and I think guitar players are the kind of the last ones to grow up. You know, uh,
Hmm. I'll have to
the,
think about that one. I'm going to have to make a chart later today of everybody I know and see who I
who's
think
grown up
is,
and who hasn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
not grown up, sort of grown up too much.
Yeah, yeah. So I noticed when I looked at your Wikipedia, it's interesting to me. You're described as a record producer who's played in multiple bands, and then it says Pyle is gay. That strikes me. I mean, aside from the fact that you obviously own your sexuality, and there's that's the world is as it is, and we are as we are, but you don't see descriptions like Neil Peart, drummer. Peart was heterosexual.
No, it's a fact. It's a feature of Wikipedia that honestly I haven't looked at my Wikipedia in many years, so I'm not sure what it says right now. But
That just
that's
struck me
something
odd.
that's in every Wikipedia entry. If you have some kind of thing that kind of sets you apart, it's always put in there. Oh my God, there's another one now. I saw this. Um, it's like an AI sort of Wikipedia that gathers everything from all over the internet, and that one is kind of funny because it's thorough. I mean, it lists a lot of things that I've done that many people don't know about. But it also, like all AI thing, gets a bunch of things wrong. So I don't know. I kind of like those biographies where a third of the information is wrong, and uh, you have to kind of decipher it yourself.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, AI. Last spring we were getting ready to do a show at the Aeolian here in London, and the other act was using Chat GPT to do promo stuff online,
Yeah,
and I didn't know what he was using or doing, and I said, I got to hand it to you for your promo skills, and he said, well, it's all about Chat GPT. So I looked at it, and then when he had posted things that included me. I looked at some of the AI descriptions and I thought, wow, this is crazy. Like they had listed things that I didn't even know about myself. And yet
yeah.
other times I'll type in my name and it comes up with, there is no artist such as.
Yeah.
So
I
strange
saw one
times we're living in.
on social media last week that it was like a historic Toronto kind of page, and the photo was like of an intersection, so it was more about kind of like the buildings and where the place was and the time it was, and there were three people in the picture, and they identified the people in the picture as being shadowy men on a shadowy planet, which it absolutely wasn't. But I'm like, yeah, yeah, I can go with that. I'm fine if people look at that and say, oh yeah, that's them.
It's hilarious sometimes. Oh man. So one of the things I was reading about in the book was in the early days of rehearsals, there were some interesting things. You talk about outraged mimes.
Oh yeah.
So what was that all about?
Well, we had this. Uh, it's funny because now it's really hard to find a rehearsal space, and everybody who has a rehearsal space really hangs on to it. But at this time, like I'm talking about, like God, what year would that have been? Like 79, probably 1979. Downtown was still pretty empty at night. Like daytime, there's lots of business and stuff, but really the exodus from downtown as being like a residential place in the core was pretty thorough. So there were lots and lots of like warehouse spaces. It was still a lot of like light industry going on, or it was kind of like beginning to end. So there was a factory down on the Esplanade in Toronto that we heard about this space, and we went and looked at it. And I don't remember kind of like where we had come from or where we had been at that moment, but it was a huge space, but it was, kind of dirty but empty, and just like a cube of like a brick cube with wooden floor, but there were no doors on it. So each of the spaces in this building opened onto an elevator shaft, and old elevator, like a factory thing with the wooden doors, big wooden gates that you had to lift and lower. And unless the gate was fully closed, the the elevator wouldn't move. So the floors were staggered, so it was kind of like, floor one's here, floor two is here, floor three is here, and right above us, half a floor up, was a mime school, which we I don't I mean, we didn't know obviously when we rented the place, and I don't know, we were just teenagers or early 20s and not really very considerate, not really thinking about kind of like how us being a rock band across the hall from a mime school would affect things. But immediately, they started yelling at us. But
I'm just trying to picture mimes yelling.
well, that's what we were. Of course, we took like full advantage of that when they first came in to like yell at us. We were like, um, but they were pretty pissed off because here they are doing mime things across the hall. They had a door. Their place had a door like that they could lock. Our place didn't have a door, so we couldn't even close a door to make it quieter or have security. So it was stupid. We had to like basically live there. One of us was always kind of like living there because it was like a rock band, just like a drum kit, a bass amp, a guitar amp, like these three things in this massive space. So um, it was kind of comical. I really wish I had pictures of it, but the mimes were not very happy about us being there, and we tried to kind of contain our time to when they weren't there, but they were just there an awful lot. They had a lot to do.
Oh man. And then you talked about getting into some almost physical encounters with another band that would turn out to be Blue Rodeo.
Yeah, the hi-fis. Yeah, we had another space after that that was kind of before there were places like Rehearsal Factory, places that are like purpose built for rehearsals. Someone decided to make some rehearsal spaces in this factory at King and Spadina, but the each of the spaces didn't have any insulation between them. So it was basically like being in the room with the band, and the hi-fis were as loud as we were. And God, we had a couple of situations that were really stupid where it's just impossible. Like there's no way that two bands can cohabit the same space because we're there to do the same thing, make a bunch of noise. Um, so this band that was next door, we didn't know any of those guys then, but it started like banging on the wall, which I gotta say I don't think I was really part of that because I knew this is like they're doing the exact same thing that we're doing. We're just as annoying to them. But then eventually pounding came at the door, and we answered the door, and one of the guys from our band went out in the hallway, and him and someone from Blue Rodeo or the Hi-Fis. It was, well, Jim and Greg were both in the Hi-Fis, so it was one of those two guys. I won't say which one, but the two of them started yelling as we kind of like stood there watching them, like, I don't know how this is going to get resolved. I don't know how this is going to play out, but obviously none of us, it wasn't either of our fault, but it was just that young stupid thing of like, I'm going to blame the guy next door rather than the stupid landlord who rented us this space, who we're paying good money to, for a place that's like pretty useless, and the hi-fis can't practice while we're practicing, we can't practice while they're practicing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was in a band out of Toronto at around the same time, 79 through 81, and we rehearsed in a place, I think it was on Jarvis. I know that it was right around the corner from the old firehouse where SCTV
Oh
was
yeah.
uh, rehearsing or taping. I don't know what they were doing, but they were in that building.
Yeah.
And they weren't rehearsal spaces like you would rent today. Like you say, they were just rooms,
Yeah.
that there was no insulation, no soundproofing, nothing. So we didn't have any violent encounters, but I can remember getting frustrated a couple of times when another band would start to go. Yeah, so it was a different time.
Yeah. There weren't, you really had to just kind of like look around. You'd see like the last place that Shadowy Men had, we rented a garage, and it was just like a single car garage, and it just happened to be across the road from where I lived. I saw the sign in the window of this beauty salon, one car garage for rent. And I knew what building it was because I walked down that lane all the time. It was like this perfect, just like little brick building with one door in. And so we were in there for a long, long time. And that place is still a rehearsal space. Like another band took it over from us. And every once in a while, someone will come up to me and say, "Hey, I rehearse in the space that used to be your place." But God, like recording studios would quite often rent out space by the hour. When they didn't have bands in, we had a place on Yonge Street for a while that was owned by Red Rider, the band that Tom Cochrane had, and it was above a strip joint. So when we would take our stuff up to the top floor, carrying stuff up to like the fourth floor or whatever. A lot of the gals from the strip club would be like hanging out in the hallway smoking, uh, just to like get away from the space. So it was kind of this funny situation where you're going by with your equipment. Oh, hi, hi, hi. We're all at work.
Oh, the smoking, man. I was just thinking about how bad it was, and I don't know how. Like, I was always the lead singer, and I don't know how I managed to keep my voice in shape at all back in those
Yeah,
days. Because I mean, everybody smoked. Your grandma smoked, and,
yeah.
and the kids smoked. Everybody smoked. Oh
Yeah, I would
man.
put my clothes, if I played a show, I would put my clothes in a plastic bag, just like come in the door, walk through the door, take all my clothes off, put it in a bag, and kind of tie it up until laundry day.
Yeah, I don't think I was that conscious about it. I mean, it was just everywhere, you know. But that said, um, so the book is written. It comes out at the end of May 26th, I believe.
Yep, May
Um,
26th.
yeah, and is it going to be at all major retail outlets, or where's it
Oh
going to be
yeah, yeah,
available?
yeah.
Yeah.
ECW is everywhere. Like they're
Okay.
pretty much distributed globally if through the various distribution networks. If a shop chooses to order it, or anybody, asks their local shop. But online retailers, bookstores and stuff, I've seen all the places, the major places in the States and Canada are all carrying it already, like, in pre-order.
Right, right. Now, and you're still actively involved in the music scene. Long Branch is your current band?
Yes.
Okay. And I understand that there was an album released just under a year ago, and you've been
Yeah,
doing some
last
shows to
June.
promote that?
Yeah, we put out our second album last June. Um, our two albums have very, very similar titles, which we really liked, and we've been sort of thinking of a title for a third album, but it sometimes bites me in the ass because I have to remember, well, what was the name of that one? Which one's which? So the second one is called Arc of the Sun. Uh, uh, the first one is called Found the Setting Sun. So yeah, the second one came out last June. We did a whole bunch of shows around the time of that's release, and still practicing and playing. We played on Thursday night. We rehearsed last night. Always writing new songs. right now we're kind of in process of editing what will be our third album. We were commissioned by Agnes Etherington Gallery in Kingston to do a performance there. And it was kind of tied into the Arc of the Sun album, where we soundtracked the Arc of the Sun throughout its rise to sunset. So
Mm.
we played for 13 hours straight and recorded it all. And the gallery is going to be issuing a vinyl album of that. So we're doing the very daunting task of editing 13 hours down to 40 minutes.
Wow. Yeah, and this music is different from the Shadowy Men. I mean, you have a female lead singer in the
Yes,
band.
three of the other three members are all women and they all sing.
Oh, okay, okay. I need to listen closer. I mean, I it's different from Shadowy Men, but it's not completely different. I mean, the vibe is relatively the same, but instead of having instrumental guitars, you've got people singing.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience playing with a vocal band. Shadowy Men, we had split up obviously many years ago, and then had a big gap of like 18 years of not being a band, and then started playing again with Dallas Good playing bass with us, and went for another 10 years, and the band basically ended when Dallas died. But Long Branch kind of started sometime before the second life of Shadowy Men. So for a while there, I was in the two bands, and yeah. Lisa Myers and Sally Lee, who were in Long Branch, the two of them had been in bands Chicken Milk and Venus Cures All, two bands that Shadowy Men had played with a lot that we really admired. Laura Pitkanen, who's the main vocalist, I met her many, many years ago when I was in the band Fifth Column. She was a guitarist who came to audition to be in the band, and I was the new guy in the band at the time that she was auditioning. And while they were all about her, I went outside with her and kind of hung out with her while they talked about the various merits of the guitarists who'd auditioned. And so Laura and I had many, many years of just being like, hi, 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 just because we'd had this very brief, weird interaction at some time in the, 90s.
It's interesting how these things happen and how things come together, over time. Um, Years and well, back in the around 77, 78, I was meeting people from bands like April Wine and the Stampeders and Thundermug. I don't know if you remember Thundermug,
Oh, of course. Yeah,
but
I'm that age.
I think I'm 2 years or a year and a half older than you. Looking at your biography. Anyway, that said, all these years later, I've had members of Helix, Thundermug, and April Wine either on my records or in my band, and you just don't even have any idea sometimes in the moment what might happen down the road. But it's interesting when things kind of come around, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think that's so uncommon in Canada particularly, and especially now. I think kind of things go sort of in cycles, but I think at one time you could have been in the biggest band in Canada and still had a job outside of it. Just like all the first like hockey players, these guys that were celebrities, and the Maple Leafs and that they would play at night on the weekend and then go to their job at the factory, or they still had jobs because they, didn't make enough money. And, such is the nature of playing music that, bands last for so long and then people move on to other things, or you meet people socially or just through some kind of means of admiring them and end up playing with them or working with them in some way. I really like how things crossover so much, and for doing it for as long as I have, I know so many people in Canada, and but constantly meeting new people like Richard Reed Perry, who just did this album with Dallas Good. Uh, they were recording it for quite a long time, and I met Richard a couple of times through Dallas with his other band, Arcade Fire. But someone who I didn't really know, but then they just recently released this like really magnificent album. So still constantly meeting new people who do music and crossing paths with all kinds of people who you have some kind of weird connection with at some point, or hey, you were in a band that opened for Alice Cooper. Tell me about that.
We all have an affinity as musicians, and it's interesting how things work out. Um, at one point in the book, you talk about there being confusion with the new kids, or not the new kids, the kids in the hall, and apparently they wanted having an average weekend, and you guys were playing the Bennett Surf.
Yeah, yeah, we did. We'd worked with the kids like really from day one. Well, kind of not quite day one, but pretty much day one of when the kids that made the TV show did. There was a version of Kids in the Hall kind of going before they, kind of there were two troops that basically merged and became, what we know as the Kids in the Hall. And Reed and Brian from Shadowy Men had grown up with Bruce McCullough. They had been friends with him. Reed and him were very close, and so Reed was studying theater tech at Sheridan College, and so his friends had this comedy troupe, and so they uh, started working together. Reed was their theater tech from the beginning. Brian is also good friends with Bruce, and just like kind of from the very beginning, they asked us to do music for them. Uh, that we would, they would use our records. I mean, at that time we had like I think one single out when they started. Well, actually, we started about the same time. So when I don't think we even had a record out. So when they were starting, like song "Having an Average Weekend" was on our first 7-inch single, as was the other song "Bennett Surf," and so um, they were trying to kind of get a series or get a special, and so they did this theater show in Toronto that Lorne Michaels from the company Broadway Video that does Saturday Night Live. He was going to be coming up to see them, so um, we started doing some live shows with them where we were kind of like the backing band, basically the exact same format as what the show was. While they were setting up the cameras or setting up their sets or whatever, we would play songs. So the lights would come up, we'd play songs, and then the lights would go down, we'd stop playing. And they asked us to play this song "Bennett Surf" from our first single as the opening music, as their theme music. But they waited until like a week into the run before one of them said to us, "Why do you keep playing that song?" I said, "Well, that's the song you asked for." Like, no, we want the other one, the one that goes do dee 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 dee. Uh, so it was like there were two songs on one side of the single, and so somehow they missed the concept that the first song listed would be the first song on the record, and that the second song. So they got those
That's
mixed up. And
interestingly
so
enough, that's how a lot of songs became hits. Some DJ played the B side by mistake.
yeah.
Um, I read also in the book that you mentioned that you've always been able to pay the rent. Now, does that mean that you've only ever played music and that's how you always played the rent, or did you have to do a day job or part time or whatever as well?
Well, really the only day job when the band started, when we were in Crash Kills Five, because Reed and Brian and I were in a band called Crash Kills Five, like many years before Shadowy Men. I was working at a record store then, kind of like while I was in high school, and then when I left high school, when high school ended for me, I worked there full time. and it was a great place to work. Being in a band because I could get time off. I could make posters for our shows. We did a lot of artwork. I could cut out stencils and that kind of stuff while I was there. But when we signed the contract for the Kids in the Hall, I think for the special, even not even the series, I think it was like at that point I'd had enough of working in the record store and being in retail. And so when we signed the contract, I quit that job. And I fortunately have not had another job since then until there's another chapter that I write about going to hair school, at which point I was like, just like wanted kind of like more of a steady income, wanted, not wanted, I didn't want to be, kind of thinking all the time as you do when you're self-employed about, you know, how much do I have? How many weeks, how many months, how many years of savings do I have if nothing else happens? So you're constantly having to measure time against money. And that gets really tiring. And I was also working on my own a lot. I wasn't in, I don't think I was in, yeah, Shadowy Men hadn't started yet. Long Branch, I don't know if we had started. Yeah, actually, Long Branch was going, and Shadowy Men had just begun playing again, but we were very, very part time, and Long Branch, wasn't earning anything. So I went back to hair school and then to learn how to be a barber. I had a lot of musician friends who were barbers, and it seemed like a pretty good life, pretty good situation. And I was really, really missing kind of the social aspect of working. And so I worked at a barber shop for almost 5 years, and it was a really tough job and kind of overlapped with going to school. I started apprenticing there while I was still in hair school. And uh, honestly, when it was great when I left there because I sort of became a full-time sort of artist musician again, and I really, really appreciate kind of the flexibility of my own time, of not having someone kind of not having a boss. It's nice not having a boss. And yeah, it's kind of like a tougher living, but it's really kind of worth it if you can get by doing it. And I thought, if I'm going to have any kind of struggles, I'd rather be doing it, doing the things that I love, rather than working at a job where I'm really stressed because I'm still learning how to do it and I'm not very good at it, or or where you're just like working like the first barbershop that I worked at. I worked for the same barbershop, but in two locations, and it was like a 10-hour day. So,
Mm.
you had 19 appointments a day and 1 half-hour break. So it was intense, but it was just, you just had to go. And I remember like when I was in hair school, it was super intense because I was playing in two bands. I had um got a job scoring a TV series and going to school full time. So I was basically doing two full time jobs and playing in two bands. And that was probably like the most difficult time where it's kind of like you're trying to like, you know, be a musician, be a be a worker in a more sort of traditional job, and still you know having 4 feet in each world.
It's really hard to make a living as a musician full time. I mean, I remember back in the late 70s when you played 6 nights a week and you could go on the road and travel across the country
Yeah,
and you made a half decent buck, most of the time. But that meant playing covers. It meant that if you were doing original material, you had to sneak a couple of songs into your cover set, and I know guys today who still they're our age or older who still make a living playing music, but they do a lot of things that I don't, I they're playing seniors homes and they're doing tributes and whatnot.
yeah.
So kudos to those who can make a full time living playing music, but
Honestly,
y-
way rather be playing a seniors home than doing the bar circuit, doing covers as a
Yeah,
living.
absolutely.
I've been to some of those things where my mother was, and it was kind of like, yeah, I like this. I'd way rather play for a bunch of seniors than a bunch of drunk people at 2 a.m.
Well, that's it. And the thing is, today's seniors are our age,
Yeah, yeah, I know it's not so
or 10
far
years
off.
older, and they grew up listening to Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and,
Yeah.
all that. So it's a different world today than it was even 20, 30 years ago in that environment, that's for sure. But yeah, playing the bars and, 10 to 2, I don't know whose idea that was, but my God,
Well, I'm
ha-
really glad that that's changing. Like when we played last week, doors are at 7 o'clock. We're on at 8:30. It was
yeah.
great. I love it. 11:30. We're at the pizza place after our show.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta like that. Oh man, I think we could talk all day, and there's a lot of interesting things in this book that we could talk about. Rough description, love letters and ghost stories from the life and music is out May 26th everywhere, and you can get the Shadowy Men from the Shadowy Planet and Long Branch all available on Bandcamp.
Long branches. I don't
Okay.
think Shadowy Men is,
Well,
but
wherever you stream your music or buy it,
yes,
it's
streaming.
available.
It's all on the streaming things, and actual records that you can buy from the band or through your local record store by asking for them.
Cool, cool. Well, listen, I don't want to take up your whole day. I do want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And until next time, cheers.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.